Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of TZ Teaches. I'm Sir Pinkbeard, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to texture the sword we made at the end of our mesh modeling course in the How to Make a Basic Sword video. Word of warning, this will be a stream of consciousness walkthrough. I'm going to show you how to unwrap the sword, talk about good UVing techniques, and then texture the sword, all without using a Wacom tablet and in the most efficient way possible. Alright, so before we get started, let's take a quick look at the sword that already has texture applied to it. So we know right off the bat there's going to be this simulated leather strap look, a darker pommel and guard on the sword, and then a lighter area for steel or simulating a steel with a cutting edge that's lighter than the blade itself. Now those are just artistic choices, obviously, and you can make the sword look like whatever you want, but that's what we're going to try to replicate here on our duplicate sword. So to get started, we have to unwrap the sword, and to do that, we're going to go to the UV editing workspace. Alright, so now that we're in the UV editing workspace, all I need to do is unwrap the sword. So the first thing I'm going to do is come up to the top here and keep the UV mesh selections in sync, and then I'm going to pull off the pieces of the sword piece by piece. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to start by pulling off the blade. So I'll Alt left click and select the bottom edge around the blade. Now, because this right here is a pole and it has more than 4 vertices, the edge loop will not continue on the other side. So I'm going to have to do that twice. So I'll just right click and hit mark seam, and then select this side and mark that as a seam as well. If I select everything and unwrap it, now you can see in our UV editor that we have 2 distinct sections of mesh, but the stretching is still pretty bad. Also, while I didn't show it, I already have display the area stretching turned on, and I highly recommend that as you unwrap your model, just so you can make sure that things are as least stretched as possible. I'm going to go ahead and hide the other sword so I can work on this without it getting in the way, and I'm going to continue pulling apart the blade. So to do that, I'm just going to grab the edge all the way up to the top, and I'll do that simply by Alt selecting both sides, right-clicking and mark seams. If I unwrap again, now we see I have 2 distinct blade pieces. Now it looks like they are connected, but actually if we zoom in on the UV editor, you can see that it's not. Doesn't matter for right now though, we'll just keep pulling off the individual pieces. So we have a guard and then a handle, and I guess I'll go ahead and select all the way around on the handle itself. So just Shift and then Alt-click will select the individual edge loops all the way around. Just do that. Of course, you can also simply Control click to select quite a few more pieces in a row, and then we'll just mark that as a seam to pull off that area. And then I'm going to go ahead and separate the bottom of the handle as well, so the pommel kind of comes off. Now, where I've placed these seams is where you would reasonably expect a sword to actually come apart if you were handling it. The blade itself is just kind of a metal piece that there's a connection piece that the handle slides over. The guard is a piece that goes on top of the handle, and the pommel kind of screws onto the bottom generally for most swords so that you can adjust the weight and the balance of the blade. And if you're not a sword aficionado or didn't do any fencing classes, you might not know that, but you want to try to unwrap things where they would actually have seams if they were a cloth object or if you were just trying to lay the object flat in general. So now that we've unwrapped all of these pieces, I can go ahead and unwrap these objects again. And when it unwraps this time, we see we've gotten the blades, and we have this little weird piece here, which is representative of which section? We see it is the handle itself. And then this will be the bottom of the blade and then the pommel. So we need to do a little bit more unwrapping here. To do that, I'm just going to grab this one edge and mark that one edge as a seam. When we unwrap this now, we can see the handle is now completely unstretched as it's dark blue. And then we're going to add 4 seams along the bottom here. So I'm going to grab from here to here using the Control click and then Shift to select the next piece. And do this all the way around. And then simply mark those as seams. I can then re-unwrap one more time. And so the last thing that we have to unwrap is now the guard itself. A couple of ways we can do that, but what I really want to do is I'm going to select here, grab the triangle piece, and then select all the way around on the side of the guard, mark that as a seam, and then come up to the select menu up at the top and select the mirror. There we go. It's mirroring across the x-axis. So if I just change that to mirror across the y-axis, now it has selected the vertices that I want there. Just something to note, you can change the mirror, and we'll just mark these as a seam. Now once that's done, I'm going to do one last thing here. So we're going to pull off these side faces, but when we do that, and if I re-unwrap it, we'll see that we now have a loop of mesh that is connected. Well, honestly, we don't need that loop of mesh connected, so I'm just going to grab these two edges right here and mark those as a seam and re-unwrap our final time. Now with this unwrapped, as it is, you know what? We could actually unwrap the other side like this as well. So let's do that. Let's just mark that as a seam, pull this off, and then that'll be pretty good. All right, now that it's been fully unwrapped, we're going to stop syncing the selection mode, but I'm going to keep everything selected in my 3D workspace. I just want to switch to the island select mode on the UV editor so that I can move these islands around just a little bit. So I'm going to move these over, and with the island select, this just allows me to click and select all of these islands completely, and I could do a couple of things here. I could place all of these pieces with enough depth between them so that no pixel bleed over is going to affect them. I could do that. But some of these faces are actually, they're identical because we did our best to mirror this model along the y-axis when we created it. So we have an actual option of snapping these vertices on top of one another so that I only have to paint on one side of the model and it will mirror the image to the other side. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on snapping, and we'll change snapping from increment to vertex. And so with this blade here, all I have to do is kind of move this close. You can see now they're in the exact same location. I can do the same thing with this piece right here, and simply grab this and snap it into the same exact location. And since they're right on top of each other, now when I paint on this triangle on this face here, the other side will also get painted on. So that's just a quick way to ensure that you don't have to paint on everything. You can kind of make your workload a little bit faster. I'm going to turn off snapping and just kind of reposition some of this stuff, but for the most part, it's okay. Now this is going to waste a lot of UV space, and for the purpose of this video, that's fine, but if this were an actual game model, you would probably want to have more than one weapon occupying the same UV space, so that it can be rendered a little bit faster and limit your draw calls a tad. But that is it as far as UV editing is concerned. We've separated out our pieces. Everything is clearly unstretched, except maybe the pommel here, but I'm okay with this stretching since it's all going to be one color. And now we're ready to texture. Alright, so now that we're ready to texture, all we have to do is go to the texture paint mode, and we should be ready to go. Now right now it's got my basic sword base color. This is from the previous model there, but there's no other images here, so we have to create one. Also, it's purple because we don't actually have a material slot or a texture applied to the model yet, and so it's just filling it in with this purplish pink base color. So what we're going to do is we're going to name the material, and we'll call this Sword Remake, or we'll just call it Sword. It's fine. And now that we have a material with a name, we can come in here, hit base color, and set this to twice its size, so just 2048, and then copy and paste that down into the next one. Now to make sure that my stretching is good, and just because I prefer working with this generated type, I'm going to change the generated type to the UV grid and hit OK. So now we have a sword base color texture slot, and I'm going to go ahead and save the model here, which will save the sword base color texture slot, but it doesn't actually save the color. And now I'm going to change the image editor from looking at the basic sword base color to the sword base color texture map. Now that we've done this, everything else is really going to be done by utilizing the face selection masking and tabbing in and out of edit mode. So to do that, I'm going to grab the fill brush first, and then just go into edit mode where I can select my faces. Now since I only have to select the faces on one side of the blade, since we placed the UV islands in the exact same place, all I'm going to do is grab one face and hit Ctrl L. which will select all of the linked faces here, stopping at the scene. Now that I've gotten those faces selected, I'm going to go ahead and go back to texture paint mode. And you'll notice that since face selection masking is turned on, these faces don't have a gloss over it telling us that we can't paint on them. So with these faces selected, I'm going to go to the brush setting up at the top, choose the correct palette that I have set up already, and give it a base color here. So we've selected the color that we want, the shade of gray that we're going to use here, and with the fill brush turned on, just make sure the strength is all the way up to 1, and fill in that section. Now you'll notice on the other side it's also filled in, and that's again because we put the UV island for one side on top of the UV island for the other side, so we only have to work on one side of the model. So that's just going to be the base color there, and I could go ahead and just add in the edge slight increase here, so we're going to do that. So just go ahead and select all the faces that make up the cutting edge of the sword, and go back into texture paint mode, and choose a new lighter color, which is this one, and we fill that in, and that goes ahead and gives us a nice steel to sharpened cutting edge steel look. And if we go back to object mode here, we can kind of see that, yeah, we have the dark gray of the blade, or of the, the flat of the blade, but then there's a lighter effect for the cutting edge, like it's been sharpened down. I don't know about you, but I like my blades to have that effect, even if the color really doesn't need to change from the blade to the flat. It's just something I enjoy. It's absolutely not needed. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and grab the next section here, and I'll just select this one whole piece, and since I'm actually making the entire guard the same color, I'm going to select all of those pieces, hit Ctrl L, go back into texture paint mode, and select my next color, which this dark gray here serves as the dark iron look for this area. And I can actually go down into the UV map and just check to make sure the bleed over is filling in this area correctly. And it looks like everything is good on the UV map, so I don't have to look at it that closely. And just while we have this color selected, go back into edit mode one last time, select every piece of the pommel, and fill that area in. Now that that area is filled in, and the blade is basically done, it's just time to work on the leather. So we'll go back to the edit mode, select all of the leather faces, switch to the front view orthographic, and change our colors to match the leather color palette that I picked previously. So we'll just fill in the base leather color, and we're almost done. Now all we have to do is put in those stripes that we saw before. So I'm going to go ahead and save the Blender file, but remember, saving the Blender file does not automatically save the texture. So I'm also going to now save this texture as it is, sword base color, for what the texture slot is actually named, save that as an image, and now this image is actually saved, and I won't lose any work if Blender were to crash or the computer were to shut off. So for this last part, I'm going to switch over to the draw brush. And with the draw brush selected, I'm going to go into protection paint and make sure that occlude and backface culling are turned off. This is going to allow me to paint through the model as I work. So what I'm going to do, we're just going to zoom in just a little bit, and I'm going to change my stroke method to line, which it looks like it already is from when I was working on this earlier. Nevertheless, change it to line, and we'll just go ahead and click and drag and go from increment to increment. We're doing in the same color, so we need to pick a slightly darker color of this. So I'm going to go with the dark brown here, and just draw around. Now it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. This isn't really something that most people are going to pay attention to, and if the sword is going to be in your character's hand most of the time, they might not even see it. But it's important that you put this detail there just in case somebody wants to look at the model, or you're having a lot of fun making it. So alright, there we go. Now because the occlude was on, we also painted on the back side of the model, but for some weird reason we did not paint on either side of the model itself. So what we're going to do, just go back into edit mode, grab these two faces on this side and these two on this side, and fill that in with the proper color. And now that it's been filled in with the proper color, we only have to draw the line across that, so we'll just kind of line it up and place in these two tiny areas. Now since face selection masking is on, we're not copying or drawing any paint over what we've already worked on, so we're just trying to line this up as best as possible, but ultimately this is such a small detail, most people aren't going to notice if 1 or 2 pixels are out of line unless they're looking really, really close. Like here, that's clearly wrong, but it's close enough for most people and you wouldn't really even notice it. All right, so we've basically finished our sword here, and I'm just going to click Save All Images now, which since we saved the texture slot before as an image, I can simply hit Save All Images, which if I had any other images in here that had been painted on but not updated, it would save those as well. So we can go back to layout mode and we can compare the first model to the remake. And I actually like the texture job a little bit more on the remake. There's not this weird gap here where the first time I textured it, the strength was off and it didn't actually set up fully and correctly. So there we go. We have our swords, we have it textured, and this has been a Stream of Consciousness walkthrough with Sir Pinkbeard for texturing the sword. If you enjoyed this walkthrough, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, well, thanks for watching to this point anyways. If you have a suggestion of what you would like to see me model or texture next, if you're looking for ideas, let me know down in the comments. And if there's any particular concept for Blender that you don't really understand, hit me up either on Twitter at Sir Pinkbeard or on any of my videos in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.